Hi, my name is Hartman. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an actor. I've been acting in Pittsburgh for 37 years. Was on Broadway for 3 years. I've been in about 30 movies. I've done hundreds of TV commercials. Gosh, I'm also a cartoonist. Your local newspaper runs my political cartoons. Sung in the White House. I've done all these things, but my favorite thing to do is tell stories. And Chestnut Ridge and your school have asked me to here today to talk to you about something very specific. So I'm just going to tell you some stories. They're kind of stupid, so hang with me. And we'll talk about what they mean. So I sat in the box. The box was 5 by 5 by 5, made of 3/4 inch plywood, painted black, hermetically sealed. I sat on a little stool inside the box. I could hear nothing inside the box. I could see nothing in the box except for one little tiny errant drill hole in the lid, which allowed a little beam of light to come shining down on my green dress. Robe. Gown. You see, for the last 28 years, I've performed in a musical Christmas carol for the Pittsburgh CLO at the Bayham Theater in downtown Pittsburgh. And I play in this show the narrator, the businessman, the social worker, Mr. Fezziwig, and the ghost of Christmas present. It's awesome. It's a good game. Thing is, though, at the beginning of the second act, when I appear as the ghost of Christmas present, I am inside this box. On the front of the box is painted a clock. And what happens is, at the beginning of the second act, the clock is sitting down underneath a whole stack of antiques. There's a carriage above it, and a coach, and a big organ, and some pictures, and that sort of thing. Just a huge pile of stuff, and the clock is nestled under all that stuff. Scrooge, who has just talked to the ghost of Christmas past, has passed out down front stage. And what happens is the stage goes dark, and the choir comes out onto the stage, and they sing 2 verses of I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. And once they've sung those 2 verses, they part, they go off the stage, and the audience will see, hear, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, bong, bong, the lights will change, there'll be smoke, the clock will move out from underneath all those antiques. The hands of the clock will begin to spin. It will light up. It will come halfway down. It will come apart. And I will stand up out of the clock and do my thing. Meet me, Scrooge. I am the ghost of Christmas present. It's awesome. But the thing is, I'm stuck in the box. I can't get out of the box. I cannot do it myself. If I would try to lift up the lid of the box while it's underneath all those antiques, I would kill the people behind it. And so what I need is a stage guy to push the clock downstage and to open the lid so that I can push it out and I can step out and, yeah. And that's problematic. I don't know if you've ever had your life in somebody else's hands. It's not fun because you have to trust that person. It reminds me of a theater group that used to travel around and do the Passion Play. You know what the Passion Play is? Passion Play? It's the story of Jesus' life told on stage. And this group, years and years ago, would travel around. There were 10 full-time actors who would play all the main characters. Then they would go to like a local school like this, use this stage, or go to a local theater and use that stage. And then they would get local people to play the other characters. So you go to the local kindergarten, you say, you know, when Jesus says, suffer the little children to come unto me, then the little kindergarten kids will come and the parents are like, that's my kid. Or they'll go to a local farmer, you know, so we could use one of your sheep or one of your goats or one of your cows, you know. I don't know why I'm doing that, but, you know, because I always thought that would hurt the cow. Moo! And who was the first guy that looked at those things and went, you see them things hanging down there? I'm going to tug on those things. If anything comes out, I'm gonna drink that. Does that seem wrong to you? I don't know. Chickens are worse because, look, that something just popped off the back of that chicken. Let's eat that. It just seems wrong. So anyway, they would ask then people to take care of the curtains and the lights and the sound. And there was, in this particular town, Warren, Ohio, they got to this town and they decided to use the local high school stage. And so they put in charge of the props the janitor of the school. There's some things you should know about your janitor. Your janitor knows everything. Your janitor has seen it all. Your janitor knows where all the bodies are buried. The school is really run by your janitor. And this janitor in this school was about 800 or 900 years old. He'd been there forever. And he was a Depression era guy. Depression era guys are cool because they kind of had to live by fixing stuff themselves. My dad was a Depression era guy. And my dad could fix anything. My dad, the furnace would die. My dad would go downstairs with a rubber band and a chipmunk and get that thing going. The chipmunk's like, because Depression era guys could do and fix anything. And they sort of had a motto they lived by. You do your job. You do it the best you can. You hear me? You do your job. You do it the best you can. And so this guy was put in charge of the props of the show. And he saw that they all looked kind of dinged up. They'd been on the road for weeks, and so the props kind of looked bad. And so he had a workshop in his house, and he took all the props to his house, and he buffed up the Roman armor, right? And they had those Roman helmets with a fringe off the top. You got those fringe standing up real straight, sprayed them so they were nice and stiff and tall. And then they had pikes, Roman pikes. You know what a pike is? A pike is a big long stick, like 10 feet long, with a pointy, sharp thing at the end. And so they looked bad. And so he thought if he took them to his grinding wheel, he could get those things looking great again. So he took those pikes and zzz, 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 and he got them sharp, he got them shiny. They looked fantastic. Opening night, Warren, Ohio. And this guy's so excited to see his props on stage. And the show went great. Here come the little kids, little kindergarten kids. It's my kid. And the cow's coming out. And then it comes to the place in the story where it's the crucifixion. And it looked real, right? It doesn't have to be real, but it looked real. So you have Jesus in the center on a cross, you have two thieves on either side, and it looks like they're nailed there, but they're not. It's stage magic. It comes to the place where they have to decide whether Jesus and the thieves are dead. And what they do in the story is they break the legs of the thieves on either side of Jesus so they can't hold themselves up anymore, and they suffocate. That's how they die. And so an actor would come out dressed as a soldier. He'd have a big rubber club, and he'd pretend to break the legs of the thieves, right? But they get to Jesus, and Jesus already looks dead. And so they decide to run a spear, a pike, through his side. So the actor playing the soldier went to the edge of the stage. He went over to the guy. You do your job. You do it the best you can. And he handed him one of his shiny, sharp pikes. What he did not know was that there was a fake pike. There was a pike that had a rubber tip instead of a metal tip. And the thing, all you had to do was press it against the side of the actor playing Jesus, and the rubber tip would go, and it would look like it was going in him. Second of all, there was a little fake bladder of blood, so that when you pushed the pike's point in, a little of blood came out. Just a little. You don't need a lot. It's just a tiny bit of. You go, and there's always somebody who goes. I love that. And you can do it longer. You go. We can do it faster. If you ever hear this. Run. So anyway, the guy who played the soldier goes to the edge of the stage. He grabs a pike that the old guy gave him, and he's looking at it, and it doesn't quite look right. But, oh well. And so he walked over to the actor playing Jesus. He laid the pike on his side. He pushed, and two things happened. Usually Jesus was pretty quiet by now because he was already dead. But Jesus, the actor playing Jesus, went, and you don't really want Jesus going, Second of all, there was no And so the actor playing the soldier pushed harder. The actor playing Jesus went, "Wah!" And an ambulance came, "Ooh," and Jesus was taken out on a gurney, which is part of the story we don't normally hear. So, you'd think they'd stop the show, right? Somebody just nearly died, they'd stop the show. They did not. Here's the thing. If you go to a professional acting gig, show, somewhere on Broadway or something, every actor on stage has what's called an understudy. An understudy knows every line of the person who's playing the lead role. And they're just like on the side of the stage, like, "Oh, please get hurt. Oh, I'm ready to do it," you know? Because they can jump in and then do the role. I know, I agree with that, whatever that was. That was creepy. Get that out of here. Okay, so the actor who was the understudy for Jesus, he was a good actor, but he didn't quite look the role. You know, ever seen these pictures of Jesus or movies about Jesus? He's always got like hair parted in the middle, you know, he looks good, he's strong, he's svelte, he looks like a carpenter, he's got that like little beard, it's parted in the middle with little curls, and he's got piercing blue eyes and a straight nose. He always looks awesome. But the actor playing his understudy was, how do I describe him? He was shorter. He was thicker. He was a beefier Jesus. Just a tiny bit beefier, just a little thicker. It's okay. He was a good actor, and he was ready. And so they start the show up again, and this new actor's playing Jesus. Beefy Jesus is playing it, and he's doing a great job. He's a good actor. He knows all his lines, and he resurrects great. He meets the two guys on the road to Emmaus. He meets the apostles up in the upper room, right? It's going fantastic until it got to the ascension. Now, the ascension is at the end of the story about Jesus' life. What happens is he meets all his disciples on the side of a mountain, and he's giving them his last words, and he gives them a great speech called the Great Commission. And at the end of the speech, he goes, "And lo, I am with you always." And this is what happened while he was doing the speech. An angel would shimmy up behind Jesus and hook a line onto him, right? So that when Jesus said, "And lo, I am with you always," backstage, they would pull a rope, Jesus would rise up into the air, there'd be clouds, and there'd be angels. Stage magic. But this was a beefier Jesus. Now, I have flown before. Yeah, it was awesome. I was very excited. I was in the world premiere of a show called Casper the Friendly Ghost, the musical. Oh yeah. Hold the applause. And I got to fly, and it was really an exciting experience, but I always felt guilty for the guys backstage who had to pull the rope. But I realized soon that it was on a counterweight system. You see, you have enough weight backstage to counter the weight on stage. And so Beefy Jesus was doing that final speech. He's going through the whole rigmarole, right? And he's saying the whole speech. It's going great. He's very excited. The audience is like, it's like a pin drop. They're so excited by his great job. And he says, "And lo, I am with you always." And he put out his arms, they pulled the rope, and Jesus went. So he doesn't know what's going on, right? But he realizes pretty quickly, because he's a smart guy, that there's not enough weight backstage to pull him up. So he decides, being a smart guy, that he's going to do all the lines all over again, and then say it slowly so they can fix it backstage. And at the same time, when he says, "Lo, I'm with you always," he will jump a little to help him out. Well, backstage, they have no idea how much he weighs. He's beefy, that's all I know. And so they start putting on weights. They put on all the weights they can find. They put on small children. They put on ducks. And Jesus again says his lines. Slowly this time. Methodically. He gets to that line. "And lo, I am with you always." He put out his arms. He jumped. And Jesus shot into the air. Like a bullet. The audience heard a thud. And 2 sandals fell from the sky. And Jesus was taken out the gurney. So, I was in the box. It was 1996. It was about my 4th year in. And we will do a run through the show during the afternoon. And during the afternoon run, the producer, and he's the guy who's in charge of the whole theater, he looks at this scene with me coming out of the box. He goes, yeah, that'd be good. No, it'd be good if smoke came out of that box with him. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. And so they drilled a 4-inch hole in the back of my box, and they attached a hose to it that went backstage, and it went into a huge oil drum filled with water and a compressor and dry ice. And the smoke comes from that. Does anybody know what dry ice is? Dry ice is CO2, carbon dioxide, the stuff that trees breathe, but not people. And so, opening night, I knew they had made this decision, and I'm in the box, and I know that deadly, horrible gas is going to be coming down that pipe. And so I sat inside my box, and I heard the choir come out onto stage, and they started to sing, "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day." I would sing with them a little bit, you know, I was just stuck in this box, so I heard the bells on Christmas Day. And about 2 lines in, I decided I probably should take a deep breath because deadly gas is coming. And so I took a deep breath, but they'd started pumping the gas too early. And there was no oxygen in my box anymore. I was going to die. We tell children, if you catch something in a jar, poke holes in the top so you won't kill the animal, but not for me. And I'm sitting in the box and I don't know what to do. I'm dying. I'm going to be dead. I'm going to die in a box. And so I decide, remember that little errant hole at the top, that I figure maybe I can breathe through that. So I put my lips up to it and I'm going, but that's not enough oxygen for a giant man. And so I began to pound. I'm thinking, I'll pound, they'll hear it, they'll save me. So I pound. The audience can hear this. The stagehands are behind me going, what's he pounding out there for now? Hey, we know how to do our jobs. But I'm pounding and the audience hears this. This is what they hear. There's still another verse of "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day," and I'm pounding, and it sounded just like this. And then I was dead. Yeah, I was dead. It was just like the movies too. When I showed the movies, somebody dies, there's like this tunnel of light, and he goes, and then you're dead. I was dead. And I'm in the box. And they sung the second verse of "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day." The audience heard da 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 da, bong, bong. The clock, it ran down to the middle of the stage. They pulled it open, it unfolded, and I was dead in the box. Just like this, 1,300 people are watching, and I'm dead in a box. They put a spotlight on me. The audience began to murmur like, you know, is that guy dead? I don't know. What's going on? And I'm just dead in the box. The guy playing Scrooge got up off the floor and he was doing this. Later we said, "Ed, what are you doing?" He said, "I don't know whether to help you or to go pee myself." Nobody's doing anything. They didn't stop the show. Finally a stagehand comes out, and they would dress the stagehands like they lived at the time of Scrooge. And so they'd put a black shirt on them and a black coat and tails and a top hat. And they told him, wear a black t-shirt. And he was wearing a black t-shirt, but it said Megadeth across it. He walked out onto the stage, he put his hand on my back, he pushed, and I fell face forward to the ground, and the stagehand walked off the stage again. The show still hasn't stopped. And I am laying on the ground like this. They say eventually that I began to move. Got up on my hands and my knees. I don't remember any of this. And I began to crawl down the middle of the stage. I then stand up. Remember, I'm in a dress. I stand up, and this is when I woke up. Scrooge said, "Are you the ghost of Christmas present?" I said, "I am the ghost of Christmas present." And then I threw up. Stage magic. With corn. People say, "Oh, you're just an actor, so, it's a safe job, right?" It's an easy job. You just make people laugh and nothing will ever happen to you. The truth is, though, that both of those situations happened because people did not talk to one another, right? Nobody ever set the time when they were supposed to start the gas. Nobody ever told that old guy that, you should probably give him the rubber-tipped one. There was no communication whatsoever. And may I say that you guys are growing up at a time when nobody ever talks to anybody else. Oh, and we text people all the time, and we might call them sometimes, but we hardly ever talk to one another face to face. We hardly ever do. We do scream at each other a lot. We're really good at that. But real information doesn't really get out between people because people hardly ever talk to one another anymore. This is a story that I tell to smaller, to elementary school kids, but I want to tell you this story because, number one, it's a great folk story, and number two, it talks about this very specifically. So, just for a second, I want you to imagine that you're standing on the beach, right by the ocean. And it's a beautiful day. The sky is crystal clear blue, sun shining down on your head about 11 o'clock. There's not a cloud in the sky. And you can hear things. You hear the waves lapping up on the surf one after another. You hear the wind blowing through your hair. There are a couple old palm trees next to you, and they're swaying back and forth in the wind, and you can hear the bark of the trees creaking as they go back and forth. You're standing in sand, but it's not that hot sand. Not dry sand, it's wet sand, so it's cold on your feet, and you can feel the sand kind of squishing through your toes. There's an old seagull up above you. He's squawking because he thinks maybe you have some food for him. Now, if you turn, behind you is a fishing village. Just a bunch of ramshackle old houses. Each one of them is up on stilts so that when the waves come in at high tide, their houses won't get knocked over. Each house has palm fronds for its roof, and the houses were painted at one time, but a lot of the paint has been peeled off. And you can see that the sea spray has stained all the wood gray. Off to your right is a bay, and in that bay are fishing boats of all different shapes and sizes. Green ones and red ones and blue ones and yellow ones. They're really well taken care of, and each boat has a mast. Each mast has a sail. We are in a fishing village on the coast of Japan 400 years ago. And the people who lived in this fishing village, they loved the ocean. And for the same reason you and I love the ocean, right? Go to the ocean, you can go find seashells or sand dollars, sea stars, toss them out the waves, or you can go body surfing, you can go surfing, you can go fishing. The people love the ocean because they fished. Every day they go out and they make their living. They sustain their families by catching fish. As much as they loved the ocean, though, there was a person that they loved even more. And that person was their Lord. Now, a Japanese lord is like a governor. He takes care of all the people that live in his land. And their governor lived high above them on a mountaintop that looked out over the fishing village. This house was enormous, ornately carved of wood. It had carvings of dragons all around the edge of it, painted gold. The house itself was painted green. It had a huge red slate roof. You could see this house for miles and miles around. And all around this house, there were fields full of crops. That's how he took care of his people. He grew food. He was very kind. He was very wise. He was very old. And for that reason, the people had a nickname for him. They called him Grandfather. and their grandfather lived in his house with his grandson. One day his grandson was playing with some toys in the garden when he happened to look out over the edge of the cliff out into the ocean, and the little boy saw something he didn't recognize. He saw a wave. Yeah, I know, there are millions of waves in the ocean, but this wave was tall, and this wave was wide, and this wave was moving faster than any wave the little boy had ever seen. And so he ran back to the house. He grabbed his grandfather by the sleeve, he dragged him to the edge of the ocean, to the edge of the cliff over the ocean, and he pointed out into the ocean, and the old man, as soon as he lifted up his head, he knew what he was seeing. Because when he was a small boy, his grandparents told him the legends of a wave that came every 100 years, a wave 100 feet tall, a wave that will destroy everything in its path. And the old man knew what he had to do. He gathered his servants around them. He gave them each a torch. He said, "Take your torches, go to my lower fields, set my lower fields on fire." But master, they said, if we do that, then we won't have enough to eat. "Just do as I say, and do it quickly," said the old man. So the servants went out, and row by row by row, they set those crops on fire, and soon an enormous cloud of white smoke began to rise above the top of the mountains. And the old man did something unusual. He went to the edge of the cliff, he bent down slowly, he looked into the fishing village below. What he was trying to see, nobody knew. But he must not have seen what he wanted to see, because he stood again, he gathered his servants around him, he said, "Take your torches, go to my upper fields, set my upper fields on fire." "But master," they said, "if we do that, then we won't have anything to eat." "Just do as I say, and do it quickly," said the old man. And so the servants went to the upper fields, and they set those crops on fire, row by row by row, and soon another enormous white cloud of smoke rose up above the mountaintop, and it met that first cloud in the middle, and you could see the fires reflected off those clouds of smoke, all reds and yellows and oranges. The old man went to the edge of the cliff, but he still didn't see what he wanted to see. So he stood one last time, he gathered his servants around him, he said, "Take your torches, go to my house, set my house on fire." "But master," they said, "if we do that, then you won't have anything. Just do as I say, and do it quickly." The servants each took a corner of that beautiful old mansion, and they set it on fire. And because it was made of such dry wood, the flames shot up into the sky, and the smoke that came off that fire was thick and gray and dark. If you'd stepped back from the top of that mountain, you would have thought you were looking at a volcano by the looks of things. The old man went to the edge of the cliff, and he finally saw what he wanted to see. He saw people opening up their shutters and their doors and their windows, people pointing up the side of the mountain at all the smoke and all the flame, people rushing out of their houses carrying buckets, anything that would carry some water up the side of that mountain. Then came the small children, and they were carrying flower pots or pans, anything to get water up the side of the mountain. Then came the old folks, the grandmas, the grandpas, the aunts and uncles, until all 300 of the people who lived in that fishing village were making their way up the side of that mountain. And that's when that wave hit that fishing village below. They said it was like thunder. It was like the hoofbeats of 1,000 horses. It was like cannon fire as that wave grabbed that little fishing village and dragged it out into the ocean. The villagers got to the top of the mountain, and what they found was nothing. There were just wisps of dark smoke rising into the air, and they turned to their grandfather, their lord, and they said, "Why would you do this? Now you're as poor as we are." And the old man, he smiled. He said, "As much as I care for the things I own, I care even more for my friends." The villagers turned and made their way down the side of the mountain again, and over time they rebuilt that little fishing village. They even tried to rebuild the old man's house, but it was never as beautiful as it had once been. And they say to this very day, anyone can go to Japan. That village is still there. In the center of that village is a little shrine. And on that shrine are these words: "To our grandfather, to our Lord, who gave up everything that he had to save his people from the wave." That's a folk story, you would say, except the fact that it's also a true story. You can find this story with a couple different titles, The Wave or The Burning of the Rice Fields. And I love this story for two reasons. Number one, it's about self-sacrifice, right? It's about saying, I've got something that you need and I'm willing to give it to you even though I couldn't really use it, right? That's what the old man does. He gives up everything because he values his friends. But number two, I love the little boy in that story because the little boy goes to the edge of the cliff, he sees that wave, he has two choices. His first choice is, cool. And not to say anything. And oftentimes that's kind of the way we live. Even just this morning, I was driving down here and I was on 51 and I saw a lady and she was dragging some big parcels behind her. And I felt terrible because I knew I had to be here, but I really wanted to stop and see if I could help her take whatever she needed to where she needed to go. And it made me sad at myself that I didn't stop. So there are times, opportunities all the time around you that you can give up something of who you are to help people around you. But the little boy, all he has to do is say something, right? He walks into the cliff, he sees what's going on, and either he can ignore it, which means all those people will be dead, or he can go tell somebody. And I think this is where we are in this world. I think we're to the place in this world where we get into situations and instead of talking about it, we end up doing damage to ourselves or our relationships. My first couple years as an actor, I toured around the country doing a show called I'm the Brother of Dragons, all about chemical dependency. And the wonderful thing about this show is that every time we did it, it was really a hard show to do, emotionally and physically. And afterwards, kids would come up to me and say, you just showed me my family. And I was like so thankful because then I could say, look, there's a counselor, go talk to that counselor and get some help. But we're at a time now when we don't talk to each other very much. And so I guess what I want to do this morning is to encourage you guys through what you have. You've got some great counselors here. Chestnut Ridge is involved in what happens here. And there's so much stuff. Everybody in this room is going to go through something. Everybody. At one point in your life when you need to tell somebody something. Not like, I'm telling you, but like, I need help. Because, like, for instance, our suicide rate is crazy. Why is it so crazy? Because people aren't talking to one another. And you have in this school an opportunity to talk to people that are sitting in this room right now. If you have problems at home or at school or any reason. Sometimes just being a good person is enough. I do a lot of shows like this, 200 a year, but for elementary school age kids. And people always say, how do you do it? Because you get kindergarten kids sitting up front and they're like, like total little spazzes, right? Oh, and then you go to the back row, the 6th grade, they're sitting out there like, entertainment. I saw Hamilton last week. So there's this great divide between what kids will pay attention to and the kids who will challenge you to entertain them. And it's hard. But there are tricks I use, Maybe, it's an easy thing like this. Like, I have tricks. Like, I have particular face tricks I do. Like, look at my ears. You see that? I'm a goat, I know. I can make my eyebrows do that. And then the eyeballs do this. Yeah, freaky, isn't it? I married my wife, and during our honeymoon, I got real close to her one day, and I said, hey, honey, look at this. And she went, oh my God! Get away from me, you freak! And so, it's like you tricks like that, you do silly voices, you do stuff with your body, you fall down a lot. Kindergarten kids love when you fall down. But the other thing that works is participation. And participation is great because you bring a student up onto the stage and his friends are like, yeah, it's my and they're very happy to see the kid make a fool of himself. But what works every time is bringing a teacher on stage. Yeah, you can't go wrong. It works because either the kids love the teacher and they're like, that's my teacher, yeah. Or they hate the teacher and they're like, get him. And so I'm making everybody happy by bringing a teacher on stage. And teachers are just like you. You remember like in 3rd grade in your math class, when the teacher goes, what's 32 times 17 minus 5 divided by 4? You know, and every kid in the class goes, like that, right? Except for that one girl who goes, I know. And you hate her. Okay, so I married her. Teachers are the exact same way. You say, hey, I need a teacher to come on stage. Every teacher will go, like that. So what do? Like, I've got to be careful. You can't just pick any teacher. You know, if you're doing your show and you see a teacher and he's sitting like this looking at you, don't pick that teacher. I was doing a school in Apollo years and years ago, and the elementary school there, and I needed a guy. I need a male teacher to play a character, Ploppy the mildly interesting trained bear. It's a silly show I do about achieving goals. And so I brought this guy, I would bring a male teacher on stage to play a bear, a trained bear. And I'd put a clown nose on his face and a little hat and a silly hat and some clown fringe. And then I'd make the teacher beg, and then play dead, fall on the ground, and then roll over. Roll over, Ploppy, roll over. It's awesome. Because the teacher looks like a fool, but the kids are like, ah! So I'm at this school in Apollo, and the only teacher there is a gym teacher. I look back, and he's standing there. He's the only male teacher. I'm like, oh, well. So I go back, and I go, hey, you're going to be about Ploppy, the mildly interesting trained bear. And all the kids are like, yay! And we're walking down front, and I didn't wear microphones back then. And he whispered, he leans over to me, he goes, I'm going to kill you after this show. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. He goes, no. I'm going to kill you. And the second show, I wasn't allowed to do any participation because he was so angry I'd chosen him. So you gotta be careful, right? You gotta be careful. So what I do is I'll look around. Look at the teachers. If the teacher's looking at me and going, ah, for every stupid thing I say, like, I picked that teacher. So I was at a Catholic school about 15 years ago in Upper St. Clair, south of Pittsburgh. And it's a fancy kind of school, right? They got a lot of cash there. And I'm doing the goaltending show, and I need a Ploppy the mildly interesting trained bear. So I begin to look around the room, and halfway through the show, there's a guy standing back there, and he's really happy. He's this little pear-shaped guy, you know, he's got wire-rimmed glasses on, he's got little blonde hair with little bangs, you know, and he's just like, ah! And I'm like, oh, that's my Ploppy. So it comes to that time, and I play picket. I'm walking down the aisle, and the kids are going crazy. They go, oh, we love this teacher. So I'm really happy. I bring him up on stage. I put the hat on him and the nose and the clown fringe, and I say, okay, Ploppy, beg for me. And it was really weird, because this never happened to me before. I say, beg, and he doesn't get it. Like, you can tell he has no idea. There's like a disconnect. And I say, okay, so put your paws up like a dog, and you stick your tongue out like you're begging. I know, it's ridiculous. And he does it! And it's like, yay! He gets it. I was so happy. He fell down great. He rolled fantastically. It was great. And the kids loved it. And it was like, oh, yeah, I'm the best storyteller in the world. You know, it was a good day. And the kids leave. And what usually happens after a show is that I'll pack up my sound equipment, and the kids will walk past me, and I high-five me or try to punch my hand or, you know, do whatever kids do. I'm packing up, and I look in the back, and the principal's standing back there. This principal's some lady principal. And she's standing like this. And she's looking at me. She's like staring at me. And she has a look on her face that's, it's hard to describe. It's, you ever meet anybody who's pinched? You know what I mean by that? It doesn't matter what happens, this person's reaction to everything is, pinched, right? And she's pinching at me. She's got her pinch on. She's just staring at me. And as the kids finally leave, she goes, Mr. Hartman, when you're done, I want you to come to my office. I'm like, oh my God! I'm a 36-year-old man, and I've got to go to the principal's office. And you get that same feeling, right? You have when you're a little kid, it's ridiculous. So I pack up, and I go to her office, and she's already sitting behind her desk, arms crossed, legs crossed, total pinch on. Pinchalicious. Pincharoni. And she says, now, close the door behind you and sit down. And I'm like, oh my God. So I do. I sit down, and she goes, just for your information, you will never be asked to come back to this school again. And may I tell you that 16 years later, I have never been asked back. I think she's still there. And I'm like, why? What did I do? What did I do? She said, just so you know, that teacher you chose to be Pluppy the mildly interesting trained bear is blind. And I'm like, he's blind? Blind. He can't see? Blind. Visually challenged? Blind. And she goes, I will be calling your booking agent. You'll never be back. Now get out. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a bad man. I'm a bad man. And so I leave. And immediately I call my booking agent and I said, oh, I'm terrible. I picked a blind teacher. And she goes, don't worry. No, I'll call her. We'll work it out. Everything will be fine. So she calls the principal. She calls me back about 10 minutes later. She goes, I could feel the pinch through the phone. You won't be going back there. And you know, what do you do, right? Oh, there are two ways you can live with this. Either you just go, oh well, it's her problem, or you do what goes on in my head, which is, I'm a bad person. What have I done? Oh my gosh. And so for 2 months, I'm concerned about this. But slowly it's getting better, right? And then one day in the mail, I get a huge manila envelope. And what happens is, I'll go to a school, and it's always the first grade teachers. First grade teachers after the show, the class is in the room, and the first grade teacher goes, class, we're going to make thank you notes for Mr. Hartman. And the kids are like, ah, I hate you. And they have got to write notes, right, and draw pictures. And I actually love it because the notes are always really great. It's like, Mr. Hartman, we think you're funny. You can wiggle your eyes. You're a freak. And I love it, right? And then they draw these pictures, and I'm always like that big in the picture, and they're like that big next to me. It's awesome. And so I get this envelope, and it's from first graders, and I begin to read through them all, and they're really funny and great. And I save these. I got a whole drawer full of them, and I'm like, these are great. I wonder who this is from. And I take the envelope and I turn it over, and it's the address of the school with the pinched principal. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm reading through them all, and I get to the very back, and there's a little card, a little yellow card with blue lines, a paper clip to the last note, and it's from the blind teacher. And it says, Dear Mr. Hartman, because I'm blind, I never get treated, well, I'm treated differently. And for the first time in my life, I was just like all the other teachers. And I wanted to thank you. The first reaction people have from that story is, did you show that note to that stinking principal? And I'm like, no. It's never going to change your mind. And number two, it's not anything I did. It's not, I fell into helping somebody because I was just trying to do my job. I was just trying to be good, right? I was just trying to do the best job I could, and for some reason, I ended up helping somebody in a way that I could not imagine would help them. And I think maybe the thing with communication with other people is that sometimes we have to look at our motives for things. Like, why do we say the things we say? Why do we not say the things that need to be said? And can maybe we change our motives to something that's more kind, something that's more generous, something that's more self-sacrificial? Does anybody have any questions about what I do as an actor? About storytelling? About my cartoons? My cartoons run in your local newspaper. I'm a political cartoonist, and I also do illustrations for books. I'd be happy to answer any questions like that if anybody has any questions about anything. I know it's 10th grade and you're sick of looking at me, I get it. But if anybody has any questions about anything, know that right now your counselors are here, and if there's anything you need to talk about, you have that opportunity. Did you feel that? That was awesome, wasn't it? The whole room shook because I'm a monster. Anybody have any questions on anything? Yes, ma'am. What movies have I been in? Silence of the Lambs, Mothman Prophecies, A Fault in Our Stars. Have you ever seen A Fault in Our Stars? Yeah, I've got a real nice part in that. I got to meet Shailene Woodley and Willem Dafoe and Laura Dern and all those people. What else? The Piano Lesson, Held Against Her Will. Those are just some of My Bloody Valentine. Mostly horror films because that's what gets made in Pittsburgh. I don't know why, because we're so dreary. Anybody else? Yes. In The Fault in Our Stars, have you already seen it? What happens is Shailene Woodley's real sad in her bedroom, and she's just thought about, what's his name, being dead. Right? And then all of a sudden you hear, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth us beside still waters, whatever. And it goes to the funeral, and I'm the pastor. Yeah, it's cool. It's so cool. And the greatest thing about doing that role is that I got that role in the most ridiculous way. The guy who wrote the book and the guy who was the director auditioned me, right? And so I walk into the audition and they're like, just say a prayer. It's like, say a prayer, okay. Audition, I gotta say a prayer. So I said, let's bow our heads. I don't know why I said it, because that's what they say in church. Let us bow our heads. And I said it, and I start to pray, and I see the director and the writer of the book, they both go like that. And I did the prayer, and I came back out again, and they were like, that was fantastic! You have the job! You were the first guy to make us bow our heads! It was so ridiculous. And so everything that I say in that scene, I just made up, which was really fun. Yeah. Movie work is fun. Anybody else? Yes. Oh gosh, I've been in so many different musicals. I just did Matilda. I was Principal Trunchbull. Yeah, I wore a dress. And I did Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast this year. And I've done Annie 9 times. I play Warbucks and FDR. Gosh, what else have I done? On Broadway, I was in 2 shows. I was in Tale of Two Cities, a musical version of that, and a thing called Finian's Rainbow. And honestly, I've done nearly 400 shows. So it's all different kinds of musical theater. Yeah. Yes? What got me into acting? When I was 7, my parents would have parties, and I'd tell stories to the adults, and they'd laugh. And at that point in my life, when I was 7, I was like, I wonder if I get paid to do this. And as soon as I realized people would laugh at me, not with me, at me, and I could get paid, that's sort of what got me into it. And so very early in my life, I started acting. And being in improv comedy kind of situations. And then slowly started to audition for stuff, and I just had a career, a surprising career, because I didn't study acting. I studied theology. I was going to be a pastor. So that's how I did it. It's not a good way to do it, but that's how I did it. Anybody else? Oh man, that is the best man bun I've ever seen. That's enormous. You're a tall person too? Are you a tall person? No. But the man bun, that adds some height. It's good, brother. It's good, I like that. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I hope you enjoyed the stories, and take care.